SoundCartel.
From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. We're in a world where we need both technology and humans, but right now, to get them working together is a bit messy. So, how do you provide authentic, extraordinary customer service? Well, Jaquie Scammell says a new approach is needed, which she addresses in her new book, The Future of Service is 5D, Why Humans Serve Best in the Digital Era. She describes 5D as the human-centric approach, made up of the physical, cognitive, emotional, social and spiritual. Especially now, as Jaquie says, since the quality of customer service has been in decline for a while.
Very few brands and businesses stand out from good to great or feel like they're delivering an outstanding service. And you and me and the listeners, us customers, we all, quite frankly, have become accustomed to poor service. So there's definitely a shift in the air with service. And I think businesses are really grappling with this idea of how do we get hold of it, improve it, but also how do we do this with this digital landscape that we're living in, which was a real motivator of the book, to make the case that service by humans can still rise above and be great, but we've got to think differently. And I think at the moment, technology is evolving and destroying service at the same time. AI has come to the party now, to the table, and we're seeing customer service roles being mostly affected by that. There's a tolerance shift with customers. Customers are much more grumpier and they have higher expectations. And we've also got challenges with ultra-sensitive employees who, let's face it, their motivation was under attack during COVID. Their resilience was under attack during COVID. So when you put all of that into a melting pot, you start to feel like people need something different, whether it's the employee or the customer. And there is a real revolution, I believe, that's needed in society at the moment, no matter what business you're in, to look in the mirror and go, where are we when it comes to our service and what do we need to do differently?
Well, part of that revolution then is perhaps from your book and your concept of the 5D service. Can we unpack that a bit? What is it exactly and how does it work in practice?
Amongst the digital landscape or the era that we're in, and amongst this need for speed and convenience and everyone wanting more and wanting it faster, when it comes to service, we can't lose sight of the fact that we are multi-layered as human beings. We are multifaceted and we need to understand that to be able to create a service that actually really feels different, that feels extraordinary, that feels different to what a robot or a machine or technology can deliver. And so the 5 dimensions inspired by all these great teachers, it starts at the bottom of, imagine a triangle like a hierarchy. For listeners who are tuning in, think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There is a precedence here. And so the first layer is the physical dimension, which is really the communication elements, the body, the physical vessel that we have as human beings, and how to use that, master our gestures, master the nonverbal. How do we actually use our body to communicate and convey messages? But also, how do we take care of the physical body? And then the second layer is the cognitive dimension, which is how do we be more aware of the workings of the mind? How do we pay attention in this distracting world that we live in? And how do we use our cognitive abilities to make good decisions and use good judgment calls? Because service is very subjective. Then the third dimension is the emotional dimension, which is all about the feeling aspect of service. And reminding people that we are feeling machines, we feel all the emotions, and service, you never know what you're going to get from another person, and you need to be prepared for the unpredictable nature of human beings. And so building emotional muscle, emotional vocabulary, have you really strong in terms of your emotional understanding and agility so that you can identify and see it in others is a really important skill. The fourth dimension is the social dimension. And we humans, we are wired for connection. We felt this so deeply during COVID, that sense of being isolated and disconnected from each other. And never was there a time that demonstrated such. So to remind people that, Service is about creating that ethical framework and helping people feel those common values amongst a workplace, a community, society, the world, and how important service is as a vehicle to keep that ethical compass in mind. And then the final dimension is the spiritual dimension, which is to remind us that below the surface, we are meaning makers, and human beings are always looking for significance and meaning, even in a very simple, ordinary moment in a day, like getting a coffee or picking up your dry cleaning. There's always meaning to something, and people who serve, knowing that, are able to just tap into that unexpressed need or that unconscious need, which can really make someone feel seen and heard and feel valued at a much deeper level. And of course, the book provides ways of doing that in a very practical, tangible way.
That's terrific. How does a boss implement the 5D service with their team?
My definition of leadership is very simple. Your job is to create the conditions so that the people in your workforce can thrive and can do their job. So if you think about leading 5D as ways of creating conditions so that those 5 dimensions can be realized and accessed by the employees. For example, at a physical dimension, you want leaders to be thinking about how do we create safety and well-being in our workplace so that people can feel good and use their bodies and communicate in ways where they've got an environment that supports them. In the cognitive dimension, leaders, you want to make sure that you are creating an environment where people feel empowered, where they do feel that they can lean into good decision making and use their cognitive ability. But again, your job is to create the conditions so that they feel empowered and supported to make decisions. In the emotional dimension, you need leaders who actually understand emotional intelligence, not only role model it and display it themselves, but can identify and see it in others and help coach and praise people when they're seeing them apply emotional intelligence in their conversations in service. In the social dimension, you want leaders to really think about how we're building trust, how we're building social bonds and a sense of belonging and connection in our workplace so that our values are being lived through service. And in the spiritual dimension, leaders need to be thinking about what is our vision, what is our purpose as a business so that we can help our employees connect to that and so that can really transpire in the way they speak to and serve their customers. And so even the leadership element really comes at it from a different angle about your job is to create the conditions to allow 5D to thrive, and here's how you do it. Again, there's some kind of do's and don'ts in the book for leaders, like, for God's sake, don't do this, but make sure you do that. So for example, don't talk about values, be in the room and show them the values, and I break it down into some really bite-sized chunks so that leaders can apply this immediately.
Just finally, and you mentioned technology before, and with the increased use and ubiquity of AI, for example, it's created both ease of communication, but also a barrier too for a lot of companies where that human touch is kind of left behind. Is there a way to encompass AI and other technology to provide excellent customer service?
Yes, we are in a world now where we need both. We need technology and humans, and finding how we fit into that world is probably what still feels a bit messy. So there are times when we as customers want to be served by technology because we're wanting that efficiency, that convenience, that speed. But there are times when we customers want to be served by a human because we want connection. And there are times when we want both. And I would say that a pro tip for any business leader right now that's trying to work through what is our strategy, what does this look like, is to start mapping out those hotspots and those different touch points that your customers experience and think about when is it a good time for technology to be the enabler and when do we want a human to be involved, and approach it as a balanced sort of view. But my point here, and this is really the case of the whole book, is when a human being is involved in any of those touch points, they better be really good at the people stuff, because technology is so clever and it holds so much knowledge and so much information. And humans, we have these dimensions that I mentioned and this wisdom that no machine can ever do. But if we're not accessing these skills, if we're not showing our human qualities, then we're no better off than the robot. And so we've got to really start to see our place at the table next to and alongside robots and amplify those human qualities. That's utopia. That's the balanced perspective that I'm trying to encourage a lot of our clients and leaders that we work with.
That was Jaquie Scammell, founder and CEO of ServiceQ. This episode of Business Essentials Daily is produced by the team at SoundCartel. Thanks for listening. I'm Nicole Goodman. We'll bring you more Be Daily tomorrow. Follow @BE Daily Podcast across social media and head to bedaily.com.au for more from the Business Essentials Daily podcast. SoundCartel.